Thanks for joining us for another AVID chat. David Harple and Jack Arnold. Jack, good to see you as always.
Good to see you, Dave.
So today we're going to talk about something that's, I would say, known in the financial advisor community, but not so much in the public. And it piggybacks off what we talked about in the last chat, leaving a legacy and doing something that is, in the legacy part, we talked about non-monetary things, and this is more monetary. And it's something called donor advisor funds. And we just want to give you some insight as to this. It may be applicable to you, or you might know somebody that could take advantage of a pretty cool tool for your toolbox. So let's just start with what is a donor advised fund?
Well, I mean, a donor advised fund would be, it's a fund that can be set up. It is usually managed by an organization. So a lot of investment companies offer these now, but there's other organizations that offer kind of donor advised funds as a service, I guess you could call it. They do the legal work, they do the tax work, but it's similar to like you would have a private foundation, for example. So you as an individual can make a donation to a donor advised fund like you would set up a private foundation, and then that foundation in a normal sense would make contributions to different charities and all these different things. You hear these Gates Foundation, that's what these things are. A donor advised fund is a more accessible, I would say scaled down version, but it's not really a scaled down version. It can be just as big, but it doesn't take so much administrative burden and as much administrative cost. It's a little bit more flexible than a private foundation. So it's a way for individuals to make charitable contributions into a donor advised fund, and then still have control over where the money goes. So for example, one way that you can use these is you could say, I want to make a charitable contribution this year. We talked about, I think maybe in a tax planning video, as far as, bundling or stacking charitable contributions into 1 year so that you get the tax deduction because it puts you over the standard deduction. So let's say that you were doing that, but you said, and that amount is $50,000 or something. It doesn't, it's something along those lines. You can make the contribution to the donor advised fund, which you still have control over, but it's separate of your estate. So it goes into a totally separate fund, but you still have control over it. And the money can sit there. It can still be invested, but it gives you, so you could get the deduction today and then make the contribution to the charity later down the road. So I could put $50,000 in today, let's say. 5 years from now, the money could be sitting there, getting invested. Maybe it grows to be $60,000 or something. Then I could say, oh, well, this year I want to do $20,000 to my alma mater. If you do 20,000, there's still 40 in there. It could be an ongoing thing, but you've already gotten the benefit of the charitable deduction. If you're doing estate planning, you get the benefit of getting it out of your estate. So there's a number of ways that you can do it, but it's a easy way to make contributions and not have to actually give money to the charities right away. You have some time to make those decisions later on. So there's all kinds of creative ways that you can use it.
So when you say you still have control over the money, define what you mean by control. Like I'm the client. Let's pretend I'm the client. I put the $50,000 in to this fund. What do you mean that I have control? What can I and can I not do?
Well, you have control over it in the sense that you can direct where the charitable contributions go. So you would have a relationship with the administrator. And the administrator you give the money to the administrator who sets up the donor advised fund, and then you have essentially an agreement with them that you make the suggestions on where the money goes in terms of the charities that it goes to, but they hold the funds. So you can't take the money back out. So once it's in there, but you still have control over where it goes as time goes on. And like I said, you can use it in creative ways. Like you could, let's say over the course of time, you're making regular contributions to this donor advised fund. Maybe you set up I'll put 5% a year into my donor advised fund of my net worth, some rule that you set up. And that just builds over the course of your life. You pass away and then you say, well, my kids I give them the ability to direct where these charitable contributions go. It's not their money, they can't spend it, but they could say, oh, well, I like this particular charity, or, I'm into this one, and they can make it's kind of a gift that you can give to say, here, you're free reign to where you want to make these charitable contributions. You can use it in conjunction with, I guess I would say more, I don't know if esoteric is the right word, but a little bit more higher level estate planning things like charitable lead trust, charitable remainder trust. You can use it as part of that, which I'm not going to get into because it can be kind of complicated, but some of these more advanced estate planning strategies, you can use a donor advised fund along with those, which is helpful. So they're really flexible. They're actually pretty cool tools, especially if you are charitably inclined and you're looking for a way to do that, versus, outside of just giving big lump sums to random charities or, kind of unplanned. You can make it a little bit more of a coherent strategy using a donor advised fund. They're very cool tools.
So one of the things that comes to mind as we manage investments and things for people. So is it actually a fund, like a mutual fund, so to speak, where you mentioned you give the money to investment companies? So like I don't know, a Fidelity, a Vanguard, a Franklin Templeton, something like that. Describe that a little bit.
Yeah. So some investment companies will set up charitable arms that manage donor advised funds. And then they will have, each place is going to have its own, there's certain rules they have to follow just to make it a donor advised fund, make it eligible for these types of things. But as far as the investments that are in there, some will say, if you already had an advisor, let's say, there's some places that will say your advisor can still manage the money in the fund. We'll have an agreement with them and they'll manage the money and they can stay on the same platform. So like we use TD Ameritrade as for clearing, it would stay with TD Ameritrade. They would just you could just manage it how you've been managing it. Other places, obviously, especially if they're associated with, like you said, Vanguard or Fidelity. I don't know if they all, I think Vanguard does. I don't know if Fidelity does. But one of these bigger mutual fund companies, they may be a little bit more restrictive as to how you can invest the money. They say you can use these Fidelity funds to manage the money, or your advisor can't do it. We have our own people that manage it. So it depends on who you do it with. Some offer more flexibility than others, but the general gist of it being you make a charitable contribution, you get possibly a tax deduction, you get some tax benefit for it. It does get it out of your estate, that if you're worried about that. That's true across the board. How the money's invested while it's in there can vary between places, and then making the contributions to the various charities. Again, some are more flexible than others. So some will say, yeah, just tell us, we'll do it wherever as long as it meets basic guidelines. Some might be a little bit more restrictive.
Okay, good. What about, minimums, or is there something like that where you need to have at least 50,000 to use this, or is it more wide open?
I think most places do have minimums just because there is a little bit of an administrative burden. You gotta have to make it worth, it's not going to be $1,000. The ones that I know of, I think $25,000 is the minimum. But if you're making charitable contributions and you're trying to do it for tax purposes, you'd want that to normally be over whatever the standard deduction is. If $25,000 would be it, but it doesn't have to be. Like, there might be ones that have much lower minimums. I don't know of them off the top of my head, but you could probably do some research and find something like that. And they take all kinds of stuff. It's not just stock shares and things. Like if you have, interest in a business, like an S corp or something, sometimes they'll take that. The privately held, kind of closely held stock shares, just in like a family business. Sometimes you can donate those. There's a number of things that you can do. It's very similar to a private foundation in the sense of the benefits that it offers. It has less restrictions.
Got it.
On it.
Yeah, and it sounds like less costly to administer than actually having a foundation that needs to be ran and administered.
Yes. Correct. Yeah.
Right. Cool. I mean, I think that's a pretty awesome source out there, a tool for your toolbox. Anything else to add?
Not really. I think it's, if you have an advisor, you can always have a conversation with them about using a donor advised fund. I think the first step is, like we just beat to death, is you always have to consider, what is your purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? You don't want just the tax tail to wag the dog in some sense, I guess is the saying. Not everything is just taxes. Is this really meaningful to you? Is this something that you want to do? Well, let's find a good way to do it, I think would be something to consider. But there are ways to make charitable contributions, get some benefit from it, have a little bit more control over where it goes, a delay when you get it out. So it can be a useful tool in the scope of what you're trying to accomplish as always, is what I would say.
I think that's perfect. Like we've said, third time's a charm. It's another tool for your toolbox, a direct way to maybe carry on a legacy and get some tax benefits. So if you liked what we had to say, like us on our YouTube channel, share it with a friend, leave a comment, and we're happy to do these on something that you're interested in. So thanks for joining us, Jack. Great information today, and look forward to the next one.
See you, Dave.